Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, thanks again for joining us for Alaska Weather here for Friday's show. I'm Dave Percy. On the warning graphic here, we've got some warning areas going on. The high wind warning out for the Anchorage Hillside on up in the Matanuska Valley, as well as portions of the Kenai Peninsula here in the red shaded areas. Gusts 70 to 80 miles an hour, this out until about 9 p.m. Then they ought to drop under that, if not before. And then back out here to the west, winter storm blizzard warnings going on there. These are out until, let's see, 9 or 6 p.m. tomorrow, and all the way up the coastline there, just beginning to come down with the increasing winds, snow and blowing snow here, especially up to the north, and then I'll spread across the North Slope, Brooks Range, Arctic coastal areas. Wind advisories here for the Alaska Range. Gusts currently up to 50 miles an hour over at Delta Junction in that normally windier area there. So the passes could see gusts 60 miles an hour later tonight, and also some winter weather advisories in over the interior, except the central Tanana Valley. Enough rain shadow off the Alaska Range there. You won't be seeing much precipitation at all. Some areas that pick up some winds might actually jump up above freezing as early as tonight. Delta Junction, for example, up into the mid-30s with those winds. And again, these warnings out, most of them, and the advisories out just about all day tomorrow, and then beginning to improve from the west and mostly southwest. On the satellite imagery, you can see the front pushing northward quite vividly there at noontime, all the way up into the southwest interior and north of Kodiak Island. Of course, that bringing the strong winds in across south central Alaska during the afternoon hours. Some cases gusts in the case of Bear Valley as high as 85 miles an hour this afternoon. Glen Alps up to 75 miles an hour. Otherwise in that 40 to 60 mile per hour range with the heavy rain back along the coast up into Prince William Sound. A little more scattered here in the interior. You can see the mountains really shredding those clouds out as they cross the coast range and then get up here and intermix with the Alaska Range there. Not too bad here over the Panhandle. Just some variable clouds. Winds, though, coming up to gale force there out along the coastline as that front approaches, but generally the precipitation back here to the west, heading north and then shearing off to the east. Zero visibility is up at Nome this afternoon. Strong north to northeast winds, high as, well, in the 40 to 60 mile per hour range all along the south coast there. Down across St. Lawrence Island, northwest winds keeping the snow and blowing snow going over the Pribilofs. Those letting up a little bit this afternoon wind-wise from the higher gusts you had this morning, but that continuing right down across the eastern Aleutians. And now that this low center is pulled northward, still at picture time there, it was south of the peninsula, but this afternoon it's lifted north into the southeast Bering Sea. So those winds coming around to west. Falls Pass gusting 40 to 60 miles an hour from the west this afternoon after being a little lighter and variable. Snow showers back out over the Aleutians. Actually areas of snow, the Arctic front south of the Aleutians, right along this band of moisture there. So everywhere reporting snow out to the west there, weak low near Shimia. And on the chart today, you can see a lot of gradient across the area, the snow and blowing snow from the Pribilofs all the way back into the northwest. Indian Mountain, which is right about in this area here, which is be east-northeast of Huslia, but southwest of Bettles. They had winds gusting close to 60 miles an hour today. They got a little elevation there. So any of the higher elevation areas here seeing some pretty good winds this afternoon. And of course, the strongest winds, this is the 9 a.m. Analysis here. Once this low center got up around 60 north, that's when the strong winds started working in, even to areas of down in the Anchorage Bowl, seeing gusts as high as 60 miles an hour, with again the heavier rain back out here. Even Cordova seeing gusts up to 60 miles an hour this afternoon right out of the east. For tonight, first front moves right up along the southeast coast there, bringing rain at least to the western areas there, and a mixture back up to the north. All the heavy weather now mostly up to the north there, from the pink shaded areas on up into the interior, with all the snow and blowing snow occurring along and in advance of the frontal system. And then some more stuff sweeping in from the west-southwest there around the main low center, still at 951 millibars tonight. So the Arctic front comes back across the Pribilofs, and rain and snow showers pretty numerous here along the southwest coast and into the interior. Rain, Kodiak Island, other front develops here, brings more moisture into the area. And then the real Arctic front back out here to the west, again extending from the Pribilofs back into the Aleutians. Another push of very cold air coming down. That'll begin to take off to the west tomorrow a little bit. Looks like by tomorrow afternoon, still be west in Nikolsky, so might not have a bad day there for the eastern Aleutians. A lot less wind here and drier for the Alaska Peninsula. In fact, a lot less wind and drier over the southwest part of the state. Still, though, the coastal areas here, again, those warnings out until 6 p.m. due to the proximity of that low center, which is weakened a little bit, but not all that much. South of St. Lawrence Island, good south flow there with winds to 60 miles an hour, definitely reducing the visibilities and snow and blowing snow down to a quarter mile or less. And probably not as bad there over the Seward Peninsula tomorrow, with a front up to the north there, and that band of wind and blowing snow in advance of that right out to the Arctic coast. Temperatures warming up there from what they were today in the mid minus 30s to mid minus 40s this afternoon. Those temperatures already trending up, and they'll continue to do so through tonight and into tomorrow, although the increase in the winds there bring the wind chills down. At the same time, the temperatures rise. Areas of snow here over the eastern interior, but again, pretty light amounts expected to nothing at all in some areas, but the upslope mountainous terrain may see a little bit more. Mixed rain and snow showers along the North Gulf Coast. Snow levels coming down, some colder air sliding in as this system pulls up to the north there, so snow levels will be back down at least low enough so freezing rain won't be anything of a threat again. And then a lot of showers there, several bands of moisture enhancing the showers as they interact with the terrain once they move into the southeast coast. And for Sunday, you can see the next storm coming northward here, the low center onto the chart by Sunday afternoon, but that front way up to the north. So conditions will be coming down again late tomorrow night or during the overnight period tomorrow at Kodiak, with probably some gale force winds, rain heavy at times back into that area. And then that next push of warm air comes all the way up to the North Gulf Coast on Sunday. So look for some gale force winds up along the coastline. And probably the northern southeast coast, you'll see some gales return to the area. Otherwise, small craft advisories with a chance of rain increasing throughout the afternoon. Wettest along the coastline, drier to the east. Not too bad over the interior, pretty good break the way it looks at this point in time with the old front up here to the north. But even these winds really coming down along the coast there to light and variable on the east side, maybe 20 to 30 miles an hour on the west side. And that warmer air dropping those winds off as that warm front pushes northwestward across the Chukchi Sea areas. Band of snow southward through the Bering Strait, but notice a gradient, not a lot of wind with this, just that cold Arctic air there along the frontal boundary. Snow showers to numerous snow showers, just flat out snow in some areas. The wind back here with this next system coming northward, rain to the east of the frontal boundary here, and then snow to the west and the colder air coming down into the eastern Aleutians, some pretty good snow showers. Temperatures this afternoon, lower 50s over the southeast coast here. Otherwise, a little cooler up to the north and west. Most areas along the North Gulf Coast are in the lower 40s. Cordova had 43. Quite a range here depending on where the wind picked up. Temperatures as high as 50 degrees over portions of south central Alaska, northern Cook Inlet. 42, for example, with some south wind breaking into the Gulkana area there with pretty good winds along the Copper River Valley this afternoon. Out of the south right up into Delta Junction at 34 degrees. Fairbanks 28, 49 at Denali Visitor Center this afternoon, and 19 otherwise at Minchumina, and 24 at McGrath. Farther to the north, a little colder, below zero, the Yukon Flats, cold spot, minus 22 in the Brooks Range there at Anatuvik, and then the very cold temperatures back along the Arctic coast, but those are already heading upward. But at 4 p.m., Atasuk at 42 below zero. Winds beginning to increase now with the clouds here over the Northwest Valley. Selawik seeing east winds at 30 miles an hour. Kotzebue had 6 degrees, minus 1 at Tin City, 13 at Nome, and 15 to 20 here along the Yukon Delta areas, but in the warmer air up into the lower 40s, even into the lower Kuskokwim Valley areas, over towards Sleep Mute, Sparrowvon, Bristol Bay, 43 at King Salmon, otherwise in the upper 30s, mid-20s in the Pribilofs, and again, colder air sweeping into the eastern Aleutians down to freezing at Unalaska, and upper 20s back out here to the west. For the lows tonight, again, trending upward, starting out around the 40 below mark up there on the Arctic coast, North Slope areas, but all going up. You can see the 0 degree isotherm pushing up through, well, all the way up to the Brooks Range the way it looks here. Later tonight, 20s to lower 30s down toward Bristol Bay, mid 30s along the coast, lower 40s for the Panhandle, 20s out here over the Aleutians. Highs for tomorrow staying below zero up here to the north, but a lot higher than what you saw today with above freezing temperatures, south central Alaska to near 40. Again, some of that working into the central Tanana Valley areas where you pick up the wind. And then the cooler conditions coming into the southwest interior. And for the Panhandle, 35 to 42 degrees or so. Some areas see the mid-40s there. And still chilly out over the Aleutians. Flying weather, a band IFR extending from probably turning an arm here across Prince William Sound and working into the southeast coast as that front finally slides its way eastward there with marginal VFR breaking out a little bit here over the Gulf of Alaska. Areas IFR in the southern and southeastern slopes of the mountains here, the Alaska Range, and hit and miss on up the east side, a little more extensive out here through the Bering Strait into the northern Bering Sea areas with pretty good conditions. Bristol Bay down across the Aleutians, just some hit and miss areas of marginal VFR and snow showers out in that area, but again, a lot lower conditions here, especially over in the northern Bering Sea. Passes Anatuvik, VFR, but could be some bands of marginal stuff. That should mostly show up on the south entrance. North entrance probably will stay maybe open, but same thing for Adigan as well. VFR becoming marginal possibly there. Lowest conditions will be on the southern entrances. Lake Clark, IFR becoming VFR, and then Merrill, taking a little longer. May not become VFR until tomorrow evening down there, but starting out IFR on both passes. Same thing for Rainy, IFR gradually improving to marginal throughout the afternoon. Windy, marginal VFR through the pass. Southern entrance, VFR to the north. Isabel, IFR becoming marginal at times, and Mentasta occasionally marginal. Tanita, the pass starting out low and early on, and then some improvement throughout the day. And same thing for Portage, IFR becoming marginal into the afternoon. Chilkoot and White, IFR the entire day. Freezing levels showing 2,000 feet aloft here, swinging up through the western interior, but basically all the warmer air now getting pushed off to the east. Still a little bit of above freezing air there aloft here over the eastern interior, but at the surface back out to just north of Nunivak Island this late tonight, early tomorrow morning through the southern interior, about where it currently is. And at 3,000, or for icing here, some bands from along the North Gulf Coast into the northern Panhandle, and then another swath back out here to the west, some leftover stuff maybe over northern Cook Inlet in the valleys. And the eastern Arctic coast could see some areas of icing as well as the Bering Sea, but pretty hit and miss out here and not too thick of a depth out there over the Aleutians. Winds aloft showing a strong jet stream here coming out of Asia, 200 knots or better. Then right about this area it begins to meander, weaken, and split with one branch coming up to the north and the other one cutting in farther to the south. So We're coming back on the cold side of the flow, but it's still from south-southwest across much of interior Alaska. And you can see at 9,000 feet up to 60 knots from the southwest here across the eastern Aleutians, right into the southwest interior, 35 to 40 knot winds here all along the Gulf Coast, dropping off up over the northeast interior, and then that band of strong northeasterlies lifting off the east side of the coast there and cutting down something like this across the Chukchi Sea. 3,000 foot winds, same pattern, southwest flow, 20 to 55 knots here out along the coast. Easterlies, 50 knots, Cape Lisburne, Point Hope in those areas. With this low here at this level, really lightening the winds up over the eastern Brooks Range and eventually out to the eastern Arctic coast. 20 to 30 knot southerlies following that in behind, and a good fetch of southwesterly winds coming into the panhandle. Turbulence-wise, occasional moderate chop, mechanical here, northern southeast coast, on into the Wrangell Mountains, but getting better here through the Alaska Range, and much smoother day tomorrow here over south central Alaska than what was seen today, on up into the eastern interior, but still occasional moderate chop there in the turquoise area along the north slope down into the Seward Peninsula, right on down to Kuskokwim Bay, over to the Kuskokwim Mountains. Those areas will be the bumpiest tomorrow. Pretty smooth, though, down over the Aleutians and southern Bering Sea, right up into northeast Bristol Bay. And after hangar flying, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome back to Hangar Flying. Our guest this evening is Will Johnson. Will was on our program last time, very experienced pilot who had an engine failure in August of 2013. And the bottom line is he handled it very, very well and set the airplane down in the trees and walked away from it. Will described a little bit of the actual event, and I want to kind of pick it up there and talk about a couple of specific questions that the answers may interest you. Welcome back, Will.
Thank you.
So, about what altitude were you at when it happened?
I was about 1,000 feet off the surface.
So, initial reaction, you mentioned that you were surprised by the fact that the prop was probably windmilling, crankshaft snapped, or?
Well, we suspect that. The prop was turning seemingly very easy without a lot of drag.
Okay. Was you and I've talked about this, but I assume that because you did everything right, your initial reaction was to, despite the fact that you're of disbelief, you pushed the nose over? What was that like?
You know, you don't really have to push the nose over as much as you just have to let the airplane do what it wants to do. It wants to maintain its speed. If you don't sit there and try to say, I think I'm going to oppose gravity and hold the airplane up here, if you just release back pressure a little bit, it wants to do the right thing. So the airplane flew very, very well. It was just descending.
And I think when you and I talked about this some time ago, I had asked you if you looked at the airspeed or was concerned about the airspeed and glide speed and all that, but I think you said that it was more just kind of intuitive, the feel for it. Is that true?
Well, it was for me. I've flown this airplane quite a bit, and it was very intuitive. And of course, at that point, my attention was increasingly towards where am I going to land, because this whole area is just covered with trees. There just isn't any good place to land, and including a lot of hills and little steep valleys. So I kind of gave up on looking around in the cockpit and just started trying to find a place to land, but it was easy to fly the airplane. The airplane wanted to do the right thing. It was very, very controllable and as friendly as it always is.
You're a CFI and a very experienced one. Would you teach engine out procedures any different because of this?
Well, I think so, because in this year we've had some incidents where people have been in a takeoff situation or a go-around situation, lost their engine, and for some reason or another it didn't come out right. And I think that my situation in cruise flight was a very easy situation, whereas if you're taking off and climbing steeply, you have to react very quickly, and the pitch change is quite dramatic, 20 or 25 degrees. You're not going very fast to start with. You're pitched up quite a bit, so your speed decays really quickly. And I think in the future, when I teach engine out, it will be at a very steep climb attitude. And then we'll lose power and show how quickly that the speed deteriorates and how quickly you have to react to maintain safe flight.
Oh, that's good advice. I want to touch on one more thing. I believe you told me that you had on board a DeLorme InReach Anosat phone, or?
I did, and this device is pretty amazing. It meets the requirements for OAS government work, but at the same time I was able to carry it with me, and it worked without battery power. So I knew that the folks with OAS were keeping close track of the flight, as was my wife who does my flight following, and I knew they would be concerned to see my flight track stop. So I immediately used this to send a message, engine failure, all okay, so they wouldn't be concerned. And then subsequently I had a Global Star phone, and I used that to coordinate with the folks I was working for, as well as my wife and the state trooper who did such a phenomenal job in helping me come out.
Well, this is a topic that I've stressed on this program a number of times, and ladies and gentlemen, you will remember we've talked about spider tracks, we've talked about InReach. There's a number of different devices that create this breadcrumb, and it's just something you need to invest in. And Will's incident certainly proves the value there. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to point out to you that this show is brought to you by the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation. We produce this show twice a week. We also have safety seminars, but it's sponsored by you, the member. And if you haven't renewed your 2014 membership, please do that. The other opportunity is pick, click, and give. When you go to file for your PFD, you can look up Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation. We really need your help. Make a generous contribution so we can keep bringing you programs like this. And until next time, in fact, I'm going to have Will back on one more time. So I hope you tune in, and in the meantime, fly safe.
Welcome back. Small craft advisories, mostly southerly winds here out along the coast tomorrow. Starting out in the afternoon, these will probably come down under small craft advisory levels. And then for a time, gales will still be howling up Lynn Canal, but lighter on down to the south, all diminishing in the afternoon. And then look for the winds to come back up. Southeasterlies increasing to 25 to 30 knots here along the coast in the afternoon on Sunday. Looks like some gales returning to the picture for the far north coast there. Lighter and more variable to east to southeast up there, Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay. And for the North Gulf Coast, 25 to 35 knot winds here, strongest back to the west. Still some gale force southwesterlies Kodiak Island, and then 20 to 30 knots there from Shelikof Strait on up into Cook Inlet. Then for Sunday, with the next front approaching the area, winds at some point in the day coming back up to gale force, possibly as early as late tomorrow night here, especially for Kodiak Island, and then working up the coastline here with small craft advisories. But Prince William Sound probably will stay in the 20 knot range or less. Easterlies coming up to 30 knots there for the Barren Islands, 15 to 20 for the inlet. Bristol Bay gales from the bay there all the way down along the peninsula here, 30 to 35 knot winds on the Pacific side of things. And then the outlook for Sunday, switching direction, east winds coming up to 35 knots for Bristol Bay, northeast 40 knots on the Bering side of the peninsula, and then you can see the low center coming up about this direction, although it's still a fair ways to the south, but behind the front will be swinging up like this, so gale force winds out in advance of the front, especially early on there for the areas southwest to Sitkinak to Chignik. For the Aleutians, west-northwest becoming westerly, 20 to 30 knots here through the central areas, and then 25 to 40 knots. Strongest winds will be around the Fox Islands there with the gales here on the Bering Sea side of the chain. And then for Sunday, northwesterlies 15 to 25 knots, higher gusts early, but in a downward mode there. Small craft advisories for the central Aleutians, northwest 20 for Shimmy and Attu. And for the southwest coast here, southwesterlies 40 knots, south to north here 40 knots. And then again, kind of a pretty good Arctic boundary right through here. So they may be up to, I'd call it gales, small craft and gales here for the northern Bering Sea areas, but heavy freezing spray continuing south of the ice pack, obviously. And then on Sunday, becoming light and variable here over the northern Bering with southwest winds only at 10 knots. So pretty light winds also for the Pribilofs and the southwest coast. These winds coming up during the day, probably the afternoon, in response to that next storm coming up toward the Alaska Peninsula there. So this will be mostly from Kuskokwim Bay on down to the south, lighter winds and more southeasterly to the north. And for the Arctic coast, east winds 40 knots tomorrow, northeast 30 to 35, strongest here on the west side, and then back up into the high-end gales there into the Chukchi Sea. And then for Sunday, you can see winds much lighter here. Again, that warm front pushing back to this position, so these winds coming down to 10 to 15 knots. Northeast 20 on the central and west side, and then pretty light winds on toward the eastern Arctic coast for a change. Demarcation Point area, Kaktovik, down to northeast or even light and variable could end up being there for the east side. And for tonight, again, the winter storm warnings out for these areas, especially in advance of this frontal boundary there where the winds will, the snow and blowing snow will shift up to the north here into the northwest valleys and extend along the Brooks Range to a point. And some pretty gusty winds, possible mixed precipitation, but amounts are going to be pretty light here north of the Alaska Range through the Tanana Valley. Still kind of wet here along the southwest coast. Another front brings more rain into Kodiak Island, and then a lot of wind, rain, and snow. This probably dropped the snow levels back down to the surface here eventually in over the southwest interior. Even colder air behind this Arctic front trying to push westward there as the low center pulls to the north tomorrow. A lot of snow and blowing snow in and around the center itself along the Yukon Delta coastal areas, and that front up here along
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.